Um, Hello everybody. The power's out because in Los Angeles, when it rains half an inch, the power goes out. It's been raining for, well, almost 2 straight weeks. We got a little break in the middle there. We had one sunny day in the middle, but other than that, it's been pretty much constant. And that always really depresses me because, that's kind of the whole reason why I moved here, to get away from it in the first place. So while I have time and I don't have internet and I don't have anything but my old-timey candle, I figured it might be a good time to tell you guys a story that a lot of people have been asking about. And I've kind of been avoiding telling it, but it's been long enough now that I think it would be okay. So before I moved to LA, I lived in Kansas City. And yes, it was horrible. It was the worst place that, anybody could ever be. Cleveland is a close second. But Kansas City really just... At least Cleveland has the Great Lakes, Kansas City just has nothing for miles and miles and miles. And, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be one of those guys who sort of just had a lot of different jobs, and every time I would tell a story about, something that happened to me once, it would be like, man, every time it's like he's lived so many different lives and he's had so many different jobs and he's, done so many different things. That's kind of what I want. That's kind of what I would love for the story of my life to be, when you look back on it. So before, I sort of got famous doing comedy, I guess that's the best way to... I never really honestly know what to say to people when they ask me what I do. Especially when it's like normal people at a party or something. And they're like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, Before that, I did something called technical writing. Well, I had a couple of different jobs doing things like technical writing and copywriting, which is basically where you write in service of, in the case of copywriting, it's usually advertising. In technical writing, it's usually not for a creative purpose. It's for the purpose of explaining something, like like a type of surgery, or the instruction manual for a machine, that kind of thing. And one of the jobs that I had during that time was I worked for a legal office, and I would type up, all their court materials when they needed me to. It was not... I mean, in some ways, it was a creative job, I suppose. I mean, it was storytelling like anything else, because at the end of the day, all trials and lawyers and things, when it's the more interesting cases, at least, it's like you're telling a story, painting a picture for the judge or the jury or whatever it is. That's the best case scenario. I mean, I hate to say it like that because a lot of times those types of trials were very, unfortunate, the types of things that would happen. But, a lot of times it was just, horrible, monotonous bullshit. And it was a struggle to not, it was a struggle to try to hold back any semblance of creativity whatsoever, because with technical writing and things like that, it really has to be serving a function. And so when you're writing, you have to be saying what is absolutely necessary to say to convey whatever you need to convey. And at the time, I had a long-term, I guess it was a couple of years. I was engaged. One of the many times that I was engaged, because it's always much more fun to get engaged than it is to get married. The engagement is the fun part. You get to think of what you're going to say and how you're going to do it and look forward to something. You get to look forward to the idea that you're going to get married. And then once you're married, there's nothing to look forward to anymore. So it was fine, It was good. I'd say it was good. It was a very good situation for that time in my life and what was going on, And most of the people who would, it's kind of funny actually, because you don't really think about it, but a lot of times people who sort of have very prestigious jobs, like a lawyer or a doctor, or people who you typically consider to be pretty straight-laced, those jobs actually, they're high pressure and they're high stress. And especially when you're first starting out, you really need to be pushing yourself as far as your body can go to basically be a machine, because the thing about certain types of jobs like that is, there's nothing that you can really uniquely bring to it other than, can you do it more than the other person? So it's the only metric by which you can succeed in a job like that is, can you work harder than somebody else? Can you get more done than somebody else? Can you get more results? And so that's really the only thing that you have to worry about, or that you can do in order to differentiate yourself from anybody else. As opposed to a creative job where it's like you might not necessarily be the most productive, but if you have the best ideas, there's a certain sort of different types of ways that you can succeed or stand out, other than just how much can you do. And so that's why I never really, I was like, well, this is a paycheck, but it's not the kind of thing that is stimulating to me. It's not the kind of thing that I would see myself doing for a very long time. And for that reason, believe it or not, jobs like that where the people are pretty typically considered sort of straight-laced, I guess, if you will, actually have a lot of drug abuse problems. You know, especially in the legal community and in the medical community, you know. You would be very surprised, I think, to learn, you know, at least in the entry level day and age, how many people in those fields have severe drug problems. You know, most of the time it's just in order to either push themselves to get more done or to cope with the fact that they are trying to get all this done, you know. And that was never really what my problem was. I mean, I've talked about my addiction struggles for a long time, but I never really got too specific into it. But the only thing that really was, well, I mean, honestly, it really wasn't that bad, to be honest. I mean, you know, yeah, sure, I maybe leaned on things more than an average person, but compared to some of the people that I've met, I mean, you know, I really, it certainly was not as bad as I think I've made it out to be in the past, you know. So there was a new hire who had sort of just, I don't even know what they call it, got out of legal school or whatever you call it. Who started working there. I'm trying to think of a fake name to call her. Obviously, I don't want to use her real name. What's a good fake name? Beth? Sure. Her name was Beth. And, you know, it's funny how I feel like working at a place where you spend all your time 9 to 5 every single day, or that was always the goal, obviously. Most of the time it was more like, you know, 7 to midnight. But I had it pretty good because all I had to do was write things. Nowadays, you know, this was back in the days before ChatGPT. Nowadays, ChatGPT would be able to take care of all of that. But my job was things that at that point they had not invented a technology to easily do it, or they had, but it was like, certainly it was not even close to being all the way there. So it would be things like, you know, it's just typing up whatever maybe they would need for trial or legal proceedings, or transcripts of interviews that they would do. Or even the most boring part of it was just sorting through things. Because for any legal proceeding, there is so much documentation that you would not believe. You know, even for just the most mundane things. And so it's funny how when you work at a place like that, I think, what's the word there? There's a specific word that I think that they use for the type of thing where it's like there's not very many people there and there's not very many options that you have, so the people who are there are you're more likely to develop romantic feelings for people. It's a proximity crush. That's what it's called, proximity crush, because, you know, really it's like, especially if you're working in a corporate job and there's only like 5 people that work there, you'll be lucky if one of them is even remotely compatible with you, or not even compatible, that's the wrong word, but is even remotely in the general category of person that you could even feasibly find yourself attracted to or find yourself with, you know. And a lot of times it just is like, I think, honestly, a way of coping, because if you are attracted to somebody there, if you have a crush, so to speak, a work crush, then that's almost like a drug in and of itself when you're just trying to get through the day, and you're just trying to do your job. And so to be honest with you, I did not find Beth that attractive at the beginning. But that tends to happen a lot with me, where it's like, I won't necessarily be attracted to someone right at the beginning. But in this case, it was like, when she's the only person that you're really seeing on a regular basis who's not an old man. Not that there's anything wrong with old men, but, eventually you're like, something? I guess of all my options here, she's not so bad. And the part of your brain that's like you're in the jungle or something, and you just have to find somebody to make children with, then it's just like, yeah, sure, Beth. And we did have fun talking to each other, especially at the beginning. I think because, again, it was just like we were the only two there who had a pulse, sometimes literally. And so it was, it was just like, yeah, we were work crushes. But we were friends for the most part. We started off as friends, and it was very nice, Technically, well, she said that she was a lesbian, but I guess she was a lesbian except for one, who ended up being me. Which makes sense, because I guess I've also always considered myself a male lesbian, if that makes sense. So really the first time that it was things that we would do in a professional capacity. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. Like, it was just nice to pass the time with her, And then I would go home to my fiance, and it would be just the most miserable. I mean, in Kansas City, it would be like negative 20 degrees all the time. It'd be dark by the time I got home, and I would just, both of us really, it was like a lifestyle where you just try to get whatever dopamine you can and also maintain a functional life. So it was just like boinking and drinking were the cornerstones of our relationship. So, it was just like, I don't know, because I don't know. The first time that Beth and I ever did something that was outside of a professional capacity was we went to this stupid brewery that was, I guess, brewery. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce that. Breweries, I feel like in general, maybe I just became a recluse, so I don't do anything anymore. But I feel like breweries really had a moment there for a while, and then now they're just like toast. Because I don't even remember the last time that I went to a brewery. But it was one of those that was like, you know, they had it in like a cap or arcade. So you would like go into, it was very small, honestly. It was not a good vibes. The vibes are very important with that kind of stuff, but it really was not very good, to be honest with you. But they had, it was like in a house almost, and they had a bunch of different little tiny teeny rooms that you could go in and then either play the arcade games, or what bothered me was they had maybe 2 chairs in each room, and then of course on a packed night, you know, the chairs were really sought after. So I could never get a fucking chair, and I hated arcade games. I hated playing the stupid arcade games. So, you know, Beth and I went there because, in retrospect, it's funny, it seems always so obvious when you're like, well, of course there was both mutual romantic interest between the two of us, but in the moment it's sort of just like you don't really, maybe I just feel very oblivious to it, you know. So it was like, oh yeah, well, we had been talking about how difficult it is to make friends once you're out of college and once you're in the working life. And I had been saying, you know, something that I don't want to happen is being in a situation where the only social life that I have is my partner, you know. So the only person that I talk to, or the only like, a lot of times what I tend to do is I tend to get into a relationship and then I don't see anybody else. Not because necessarily the other person is forbidding me from it, but, you know, you just get very, I don't know even really why. I guess it's because it feels good to like sort of be unhealthily attached to someone. That's a lot more fun and interesting than having a normal, healthy relationship. You know, but you know, so I had been very open and with saying things like, you know, I want to try to make sure that I am being sociable and making new friends and doing things with people who are not my partner, you know. And she was like, oh my gosh, yes, that's exactly the way that I feel, because she was in a very similar situation, you know, and we both knew that we had someone else. And so we said, well, then why don't we, you know, we can do something after work. You know, we can go to the brewery. And it was at the beginning, it was like, alcohol is a very sort of not only socially acceptable addiction to have in America, but, well, I guess all over the world, but not only is it socially acceptable, it's actually socially encouraged, you know. So we would both joke about how, you know, we were both love to drink a lot, and my way in was that I loved IPAs. And she said that they were disgusting. And so I said, well, then you just haven't had the right one, you know. So you just got it. It's an acquired taste. So let's go and we'll pick out a nice IPA for you. That'll get you, you know. And we'll become friends. And for a while it was like, you know, and listen, I guess I think that people really, obviously cheating is wrong, but there is something going on right now with the current generation in terms of like, they view cheating as something that should be it's I guess it's like, to them, cheating is a form of domestic abuse. And I guess that's not really, I think that cheating is a much more normal thing, unfortunately, than a lot of people wish that it was. And so I guess that's an interesting question. I guess you could argue, is cheating abuse or is it not? I don't know. I don't necessarily think so. I mean, I would never want to get cheated on. I mean, getting cheated on is horrible, but I don't think that it's just something that happens, And the line, I mean, I'm not trying to say that what happened between Beth and I was ambiguous, because it absolutely was not. It was 100% cheating, but I guess I just don't have a very sacrosanct view of, I don't know, that kind of stuff. So for a while, then it sort of was literally like, yeah, we just were friends. We would do things like, my candle's getting really low. Don't worry, I have 2 others. We would do things like, try to do something after work. And then we would go to lunch. And it was sort of like, I feel like, to be honest with you, it was over, I think, with my current partner before we even escalated to having a physical relationship, Beth and I mean. Because it was like, once your attention is on somebody else, for me at least, then it's pretty much over. Now, I will say that sometimes my attention can go back to the original person. It's a very fickle thing, which sort of terrifies me, because it's almost like I feel like I'm kind of at the mercy of whatever the whims of my attraction may decide. So if somebody enters my life, I don't really have a choice whether I'm attracted to them or not. I don't really have a choice whether I want to be romantically involved with them. It just happens. It's like my heart decides, and then I have to. I guess that's why I don't think cheating is that. I don't want to say I don't think cheating is a big deal, because it is a big deal. But I just mean, like, I don't think it is an intentional form of abuse, because for me, at least, it just kind of happens, And it's a shitty situation. You want to try to make everybody happy. You want to try to do things. First, I'm usually in denial, and then it's like, well, you just want to try to make everybody as happy as possible. I mean, it's a tale as old as time, really. So we would, the cheating, of course, tore me up inside, especially because, me and my current partner had sort of, the biggest thing I think with me is that I just dread having to disappoint them. I really dread the eventual breakup and sort of crushing of the person that inevitably happens, and that I know is going to happen eventually. So that's why I'm sort of always like, yeah, well, I'll try to make him as happy as I can while I'm still around. And then once that goes away, then at least it's like, well, at least we had a nice engagement. So the cheating part of the story really is not that interesting. that's kind of just the most normal thing that happened in all of this, honestly. You know. I mean, it's funny how this kind of stuff happens the same way every time for everybody, I feel like, you know. It was sort of like when you are about to be in a car accident and you see that you're about to hit the person, like for a while you're like, oh, I can avoid this. I can stop in time. It'll be fine. And then you realize you can't, but you still have a few milliseconds before you actually do hit the thing. And that period of time always feels like an eternity. For me, at least. Because you're still living in the world where it hasn't happened yet. But you know you're not going to anymore. There's a sort of disconnect. So there comes a time when I don't want it to make it sound like I'm a cheating expert, because I'm really not. This is the only time that it has happened, I would say, officially speaking. There have been a lot of other gray areas, but this was the only time where I literally would, F-U-C-K somebody and then go home to another person and say, don't worry, I did not just F-U-C-K somebody else, and then F-U-C-K that person. I'm trying to remember, actually. I think I'm trying to remember what, and it's not funny, I really shouldn't be laughing, but just for the hell of it, I'm trying to remember what the shortest amount of time between, that with each of them. I think it was like 12 minutes. Because there was one time where I was in the car with Beth and we sort of were doing the thing. And then I said, okay, goodbye. And I came right into my apartment. It turns out the other one was wanting something. And I don't mean to, I'm not trying to refer to her like that because I'm trying to be disrespectful. It's just obviously I don't want to use these people's names. So the other one was sort of pounced on me right when I got in the door. And so I was like, damn, that was not intentional. That was not planned. But it was a short refractory period, let's say. And that's the funny thing, like, it's not like that was better with one or the other. It was kind of the same, and the fact that I got to have it so close together, I could really compare, contrast. And they were both good, That's kind of the reason why I couldn't really choose, because it was like, well, I guess either way, it's kind of the same, And it's good in both cases. Let me make that very clear. I suppose that... No, I'm even trying to think of which one had even a little bit of an edge over the other, but they were both good in different ways. That was what was nice. It was like just a different flavor. So eventually I did not know at the time the true extent of what Beth was dealing with. You know, because she's not the type of person who seemed that way. You know, I mean, she was like valedictorian of her bullshit wherever she went, and you know, on track to be this really prestigious attorney at this prestigious law firm, and so put together, you know. You know, she's just not the type of person that you think has a problem like that. You know, I guess the only thing that when I look back on it, I mean, at the time, I didn't really think that this was anything strange, but, you know, it mostly was just like, we would not be able to stop. That was the thing. Like, you know, if we were going to have one drink, then we were going to have 15, you know, or something ridiculous. It was like half the time we wouldn't even remember when we stopped. And my relationship with the other one kind of disintegrated pretty quickly into the Beth thing, because I couldn't even, you know, honestly, I couldn't even pretend to be interested still. I couldn't even keep up appearances, because I would just be like, hey, you know, I'm after work, I have to work late, so I'm not going to probably be home tonight until 10 o'clock, and then I'm just going to go straight to bed. You know, just for the sake of courteousness, I always would come home at night. You know, I would never, because that just felt like it was crossing a line for me, you know. Sleeping over Beth's house blatantly. So I would always make sure, no matter how late it was, I would come back home and sleep with the other one, you know. But you didn't really have to be a rocket scientist to figure out what was going on. And that's the other thing. In retrospect, it's like, you think that you're doing such a good job being secret, but then you look back and you're like, oh, it was just so obvious that it's insane, you know. And so the other one went to move back with her parents, and, you know, I don't know, somewhere in Oklahoma. So then the part that I always dread, which is, it's one thing when you're both cheating on someone else with each other, but when it's just one of you that's cheating and the other one is available completely, that starts to really cause problems, you know. So in this case, it was me, you know. And so before, when it was like we were kind of on the same page, when it was like, well, you know, I have to get home, like I can't be out too late, or I can't do all this, right, blah, blah, blah. It was just like, well, no, I don't know, because now I am completely freed up. And you're the one who's not. And you know, I wouldn't say that it was tense, that it ever got tense really, but the closest things that we ever had to arguments were over that. But, you know, it was plain as day that she was not happy with her other one, because that was a big bonding sort of thing that we would bond over at the beginning, was venting about the others, venting about each of our other ones, you know. And so I was like, well, you know that you're gonna, you know that it's not gonna work out between you guys. So what's the hold up, Then it's funny because I didn't even know about it. It was the situation that I always kind of dreaded, where it was like one day she was just in a car accident and we're not supposed to be anything but co-workers in the eyes of everyone else in our lives. So if something happens to one of us, nobody's going to think to say, oh, hey, somebody should tell Dan, So I thought I just got ghosted. Because it was actually right around this time. It was right before the winter holiday. So I thought I just got, it was over. And I was like, well, I don't know what's going to happen when we both have to come back into work, but whatever. And that was a dark couple of weeks, that holiday, because I did not come back to see any family. I stayed in Kansas City, and I just sort of sulked by myself in an apartment that was basically empty because I didn't own any of the furniture that we had before. It belonged exclusively to the other one. But that's okay because, and again, I really don't want to make this an AA meeting, but the short version is, I just was just doing whatever I could to sort of forget where I was. So then we both went, it was the day came when we were supposed to go back into work. And Beth wasn't in. Damn it! Just dripped hot wax on myself. I'm actually surprised that was not hotter. As in, like, temperature-wise. Wow, can you see it's on my finger? Can you see it's on my finger? No, you probably can't. Yeah, you kind of can. Okay, well, I'm going to switch candles then. Okay. It could have been worse, I guess. God only knows when the LADWP is going to fucking put the, power back on. Hang on, sorry, I'm just trying to figure this out. I hate matches because it's going to burn me. Okay, wait. Yep, there it is. Yeah, so I came back to work, and Beth usually would get in before me, but her car wasn't in the parking lot. So I came in and I was like, I had been my anxiety had been up all day because I've been preparing for a confrontation I had been preparing for there to be something that happened that explained why, I hadn't heard from her in several weeks. But she wasn't there. And so Doug, who was the name of the guy who, sorry, this candle's a lot, it's a new one, so it's going to take a minute before it burns bright. Doug was our boss. And I did not want to I didn't want to press it too much, So eventually, after I had been in for a few hours, I finally asked him, "Where's Beth?" And Doug was like, "Oh, she's been dealing with some personal problems." And so then, of course, this is the first I had heard about it. So I was like, "Well, what kind of personal problems?" And Doug was like, "Oh, I don't know. I think it's private, And so then, even though I was, that was like, it was killing me inside. I had to basically drop it and pretend like I was just like, "Oh well, hope she's all right," even though, I'm freaking out. I don't want to implicate her in anything by acting like I'm too worried about it, Still nothing on my phone. I still heard nothing. And I said, and I did eventually, because I could only do it so well. So eventually I was like, "Well, do you know when she's going to be back?" Just because, and I made up something. I was like, I need your help because I can't do this unless I have some document or whatever. And he was like, "Oh, she'll be back. I believe that they said she'll be back in 2 weeks from when I asked, So the middle of the month. It was the beginning of the month. So then all of a sudden it was like all these things were running through my head, like, what the hell happened? Because she never mentioned that she was taking a vacation or a sabbatical, or if it was a family member who had died or something, she would have told me about it, because we had been talking every day for a while. And to be honest with you, I never got to the point where I was even anywhere close to moving on. I pretended like I was moving on because that's what I had to do in order to get through the day, which I barely did anyway. But the entire time it was like an open wound that was gushing out of my body, And then finally, I get a text message. And I nearly, because I was holding my phone at that, it was one of those periods where I was basically holding my phone the entire time waiting for this text message to come through. So when it finally did, I jumped and I was like, "Ah!" And I dropped the phone, and thought that was funny. So I picked it back up, and it was very short. It just said, "Hi, I'm so sorry, but I've been in rehab. This is the first time that I've been able to use my phone. They let me use my phone, every week for 10 minutes. And so I was like, well, I didn't say this, but I was like, so that technically means that you've had your phone the past for 2 times before this, and you just wait till the 3rd time. But at least it was like, okay, well, this isn't the end of the world, at least, because she said nothing has changed between us, and I'm so sorry to have probably worried you or whatever, but I'll talk more later. I get out on the 12th. And so that at least, you know, I mean, it raised a bunch of new questions at the same time, but I was like, well, okay, I guess it's a big relief, you know. And it's sort of. Anyway, the next couple of the time in between when I found out and then when she finally did get out was not that interesting. I mean, it was just more of me sitting alone in my house and, you know, doing a terrible job at work and getting blitzed all the time. You know, and it was in that horrible winter gray, you know. And it would snow all the time, but it was not a good, fun snow. It was oppressive, you know. Just dark and cold. And what really kills me about that is the fact that you can't go outside. You have to stay in your building. You know, so you just go from building to building. You go from interior space to interior space. And that just drives me nuts. So finally she got out and, you know, I was a little upset about this too because she didn't text me before. I just came in to work on the 13th and she was also there. I pulled up and I saw her car there, so of course I went into fight or flight mode, but I was like, well, I gotta pretend that this is normal, you know. And I went inside, you know, and she was there in her usual spot, and so we pretended. I was like, oh, hey, you're back. You know, and I wonder if, you know, if she could see in my eyes like that I was saying things that were like, oh wow, well, how was it? But inside I was like, and so she sent me a Slack message and was like, let's do something after work today so we can talk about everything. That was the longest day of my life, waiting for work to be over. I don't think I got a single thing done. And so, you know, we got out of work finally. It was like I could feel every single second ticking through me. Finally got out of work. And what we would always do was we would both leave independently of each other, and then we would drive down to this big abandoned parking lot that was down the road, that we would both pull into. You know, and we would go back behind the dumpster or whatever so nobody would see. And she, you know, as soon as she got in the car, we basically, you know, we hugged each other and then we started, you know, getting sloshy. Before even, and that was a nice memory, you know, before even saying anything else, it was like we said everything that needed to be said in terms of our emotions for each other, wordlessly. It was like as soon as that happened, then I could feel that everything was going to be okay between us, you know, and that was really what I cared about the most. So then afterwards, when we were like catching our breath, I was like, so what the heck, what happened? And she said, yeah, I'm sorry, I have not, I was sort of keeping this from you, but I've had a problem with the sniffles, and that's not what she said, but that's what I'm saying for the YouTube. You know, I had a problem with the snifflers. the sniffies, you know. And I was like, what? Because I knew that she did every once in a while when she would go out, you know, but I was like, what do you mean? I mean, I never saw, you know. And she was like, well, you probably never saw me, but I was all the time, you know. And it started with, you know, her ADHD medication. But she said apparently she had been dealing with this since she was in college. So I was like, damn, you know. And she said, yeah, I've already told Doug. But I need a career change, you know. It sucks, but it was just so inextricably linked to my job. And I thought that I could do it, but now I'm sort of realizing that I can't. I have to do something else, and I'm probably going to have to, you know, just change everything about my life. But it was good because she was like, well, our thing is good because we did not, you know, what we did not depend on the sniffles, you know. So I think it's actually, this would be good for me, you know. I broke up with my other one, and so we are going to be able to finally, you know, have the relationship that we had always wanted, because the only two things that were in the way were, you know, our other ones and our job. But she was like, yeah, that's toast now, that's done. So then I was like, oh, well, that's great. I mean, it's a lot at once. It's a lot that's hitting me at once, but I mean, I think that's good news, you know. Assuming that nothing changes, and assuming that, you know, you still want to be with me. So on her last day of work, I said, well, we should do something to celebrate. You know, we should do something to celebrate your new life, was the way that I put it. So let's go to, stupid to say this, you know, but our place was the Cheesecake Factory. And obviously, you know, we both knew that it was not, you know, that's not the height of class and luxury, but it just was like a guilty pleasure. And so we said we can celebrate by going to the Cheesecake Factory, which I mean, the Cheesecake Factory is not cheap, but, you know, at least it's not some of the other expensive restaurants that these fellas are always taking their people, you know. Oh, man. Oh, no. So, I guess I should That's not entirely the truth. I don't know why my first instinct is to lie all the time. You know, it's not on purpose. And this is the same reason why I got into trouble with the cops, because everybody assumed that my lying, not even lying, but you know, for some reason, I don't know why, even when it's about innocuous things, it's like my first instinct is to, I guess, maybe as a defense mechanism to try. I mean, it's the sort of thing where, like, you know, just the other day, my friend was asking me what I had for lunch, and I said, "Oh, I just had some leftovers." But that was not true. I had gone out and I got Chipotle. So why would I lie about that? That's something totally, completely inconsequential that nobody would give a shit about. You know, the only possible explanation is that I guess I was worried that she would judge me for going to Chipotle. I don't know. See, it just doesn't make any sense. And so that's why I just don't want you to think that I'm lying and that I lie because I'm trying to hide something. That's really not the case at all. I guess I maybe just have whatever the kleptomania thing is, kleptomania but for lying, you know? Like, I met a woman who had kleptomania once, and it was like, so I was talking to her, and then she laughed, and I said, "Where are my sunglasses?" And I couldn't find my sunglasses, and so I had no idea where they were. I thought I just lost them again because I lose them all the time. She came back out and said, "I'm so sorry. I stole your sunglasses. Here you go. You can have them back. I have no idea." And I said, "Well, I guess it's okay." She was like, "No, it's not okay because, you know, I just have a problem with that kind of stuff. I have kleptomania, and it's like compulsive." Is that the right word? Word where it's like you just do it as a reflex and you don't even think about why. Like, I don't want your sunglasses and I don't want to have stolen your sunglasses, you know. But it's just, for whatever reason, I stole your sunglasses. So, I panic. That's what it is. You know, I just panic all of a sudden. And I think that I can sort of protect myself by making up a very, very small thing. It's like I'm trying to cushion the truth, you know. I hadn't broken up with the other one. We were still together. I just really feel terrible about it. You know, because this whole time that Beth was supposedly in rehab, I was, you know, an inconsolable mess who was completely absent from my life. And what difference does it make anymore anyway? doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what I tell you people anyway. Difference does it make? Whether we were together or not. You don't know me, you don't know her. You don't know any of us. Maybe they're not even real, for all you know. Maybe I'm making all this up. Just kidding. But maybe. Maybe I'm making all this up. It's a made-up story. I just wanted her to get back what we had before. Because everything was going fine before. She was very, very drunk. And she couldn't even walk. So obviously she couldn't drive. So I left her there at the bottom of the stairs. I carried her in and I sat her down very gently. And I kissed her goodnight. And she's, I heard her going, Came back the next morning. And she was, when I had left her, I left her leaning against the door like this. Because her apartment was on the second floor, so it was like there were a couple different apartments. It was like one of those where you open the door and there's a little base of the staircase, then you go up the staircase and there's two doors on either side. The landing, I guess is what they call it. So when I had left her, I got there and I said, oh my gosh, she slept on the landing, but opened the door and she was face down, arms and legs sprawled out. And I think it was that I didn't really process exactly what I was seeing. you know, it's kind of like in true crime podcasts where the people say, I thought it was a mannequin, you know, because when you see something like that, the only time that you've ever seen something like that is like, you just don't have a visual point of reference. So shit. This was a mistake. Telling this whole story was a mistake. She had fallen down the stairs. So she woke up, tried to walk back up to her door, and they said she just fell. And if you know, I guess if you fall right, you can hit your head really hard, you know? Now, like I said, I panicked. So I went home. And the cops tried to, they, again, it's just one of those things, like, I don't know why I went into her phone and deleted all of our messages, I don't know why I deleted all of our pictures. When your brain processes a trauma like that, you don't really make rational decisions, Anyway, it was just an accident, and it was very unfortunate. Her family, I've been trying since it happened, because I guess it's easier for them to hold on to hatred for me, hold on to the belief that I was responsible, than it is to accept that she just fell down the fucking stupid stairs, you know. I have to switch candles again. I didn't want it to have to go like that. What do you think happened?